My name is Claire Madison, and at 36 years old, I've built the kind of life most people dream of. I work as a senior financial analyst in the heart of Manhattan, making a solid living and enjoying the perks of my career. Just last year, I bought a penthouse in the city I've always admired, a dream I worked tirelessly for. By all accounts, I've made it. But no matter how many compliments I get at work or how much progress I make, the second I step into my family's orbit, I turn back into the 15-year-old girl who was always trying to please them. It's especially bad with my mother. She has this way of looking at me like I'm still that rebellious teenager, always testing boundaries. It's something I've never fully understood. I guess, from her perspective, I still carry the same traits that once drove her crazy. The ones she hated when I was younger. Like the way my eyebrows scrunch up when I'm deep in thought, just like my father's used to. The way my laugh sounds exactly like his, something she can never forget. I was just 12 when my parents divorced. The fallout was like a storm ripping through our lives. My dad, who was always distant, had an affair with my mother's best friend. It's one of those moments that stays burned in your memory. The day my mom found out, she just lost it. She spent days locked in her room, barely eating, while I stood by, powerless, just watching her shrink into herself. As time went on, it was clear that every time my mother looked at me, it was a reminder of my father's betrayal. Her words were always laced with bitterness. "You look just like him," she'd say. It was never a compliment. It was a reminder of her pain, and I could feel it, even as a child. That emptiness in her eyes when she said it, it stayed with me. After the divorce, my dad moved far away. We used to see each other once a month, but the visits dwindled over time. Now, we barely talk. It's been years since I heard from him. His birthday card is the only connection I have left with him, and I'm fine with that. He's just a ghost from a life I no longer recognize. When I turned 16, my mother remarried. Douglas, her new husband, had a son, Mark. He's 2 years older than me, but we never really got along. Mark was the kind of guy who floated through life with little direction. After high school, he spent 2 years bouncing between part-time jobs while claiming to be finding himself. Eventually, he enrolled in college, but at a community school, not quite matching the same trajectory I had. I, on the other hand, worked hard, earning a full scholarship to a state university. Our paths couldn't have been more different, and the gap between us just grew wider. When I landed my job on Wall Street right after graduation, it felt like a triumph. But Mark, despite his setbacks, also found a job at a local real estate company. Even though he was still struggling, I felt like I had to help out. I knew my mom and Douglas were going through tough times financially, so Mark and I agreed to send them money every month. I sent $1,000, while Mark contributed a modest $200. What I didn't expect, though, was how it would all unfold. Mark made it clear to my mom that he was the one supporting them. Every time I sent money, he made sure to tell her, "It's all from me, don't worry." My mom, not missing a beat, wholeheartedly believed it. She'd always say, "Mark is such a good son." It stung, but I didn't make a fuss. It wasn't about the credit, it was about helping them. But over time, I started to feel like I was invisible in my own family. Whenever there was a financial emergency like the car breaking down, or medical bills piling up, my mom would call me, then Mark. "We really need help," she'd say, and I'd send the money without hesitation. But when the conversation ended, she always made sure to tell me, "Mark is such a blessing." And I'd swallow it, my stomach turning a little each time. I tried to confront Mark once. "Why are you telling her it's all you?" I asked. He just shrugged and said, "She believes it, Claire. It's easier that way." But deep down, I knew it wasn't just easier, it was a manipulation. The thought of it ate at me, but I kept sending the money. Because, in the end, I wasn't trying to buy my mother's love, I was doing it because I thought that's what family did. 3 years had passed since I'd last been to my mother's house. It wasn't intentional. In fact, I'd been invited several times, but the excuses were always there: work, travel, deadlines. The same things that kept me glued to my office chair in Manhattan. This time, though, I had made a conscious decision to show up. It wasn't easy, but it felt like something I had to do. It was the annual family gathering, the one time of year when my mom and Douglas pulled together distant relatives from every corner. A few faces I barely recognized, kids running around, laughter in the living room. This was supposed to be a family celebration. For everyone except me, it seemed. The truth was, I dreaded these gatherings. My mom had a way of turning what should have been lighthearted into something emotionally suffocating. Last time she'd done it at Douglas's 60th birthday party. I was talking about a recent project I led in the city, one that had earned me a major promotion. I was proud of it. I wanted to share that pride with my family, but as I spoke, she interrupted. "You're always talking about yourself, Claire. Have you ever thought about how Mark might feel?" Douglas had chimed in too. She's been like that since she was little, always focused on herself. It was like a punch to the gut. That night, I could feel the eyes of the relatives on me, each one whispering behind my back. And Mark, he didn't say a word. He just stepped in and consoled my mother, as if I was the one in the wrong. I remember standing there, frozen, trying to force a smile while the room seemed to shrink around me. The air was thick with awkwardness. But this time, things would be different, or at least I promised myself they would be. I parked my car at the far end of the driveway, away from the crowd that had already gathered. The house looked the same, still cozy, still cluttered with trinkets and old family photos, the way my mother liked it. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting my beige dress and smoothing out my cardigan. I'd dressed simply, nothing too flashy, just a subtle elegance. I'd been raised to believe that showing up for family meant blending in, not standing out. As I grabbed the bottle of wine I brought along, I felt a knot in my stomach. I took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. The wind tousled my straight bob, but I didn't mind. It was a small thing, and in the grand scheme of things, it didn't matter. My hands were sweaty, but I ignored the discomfort. I had made a decision to face the past. I was walking into that house with my head held high. The moment I stepped inside, I was hit with a wave of noise. Kids laughing and running in the hallways, adults chatting in the living room. The energy felt chaotic, but it was normal, almost comforting. My mom appeared in the hallway as soon as I stepped through the door. "Oh, Claire, you're here," she said, her voice sounding surprised, almost in disbelief. "I thought you might cancel. You've been so busy lately." I managed a small smile. "I received the invitation from Douglas," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I brought this," I added, offering her the wine. She took it with a formal thank you and motioned toward the living room. "Everyone's already gathered. Your name tag is on the table." I nodded and headed toward the entrance. A small table with neatly arranged name tags stood at the corner of the room. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't this. There it was, right on top, my name Claire Madison. Below it, in much smaller letters, Parasite. I froze. My fingers trembled slightly as I stared at the tag. The handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's. The word, Parasite, was like a slap across my face. An insult I hadn't seen coming. I stood there for a long moment, trying to process what I was seeing. It wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. A cruel reminder of everything I had done wrong in her eyes. Then I heard someone behind me. "Hey, Claire." I turned to find Mark standing there, looking all too comfortable in his usual light blue shirt and khakis. His casual stance made my stomach churn. He must have seen the look on my face, because a flicker of guilt crossed his features. "Is this some sort of joke for Mom?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, though I could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface. Mark just shrugged. "She's been a bit sharp lately, especially when she drinks." I took a deep breath, forcing the bitterness down. "Right, so she's doing this now?" Mark didn't offer much more than that. He was a master of deflecting, and I wasn't surprised. After all, this was the same guy who'd been lying about sending all the money to her. The same guy who couldn't care less about the emotional toll it took on me. I couldn't understand how he could stand there, wearing that bland expression, acting as if this wasn't a big deal. I turned away, not wanting to get into it. Not here, not now. I didn't have to explain myself to him anymore. Let's just go to the living room. I need to greet everyone. The living room was full, as expected. Relatives I barely knew. Aunts, uncles, cousins, who had 1,000 questions for me. All the usual small talk. "Claire, you look so grown up. Working in finance, wow, that's impressive," one of my aunts said. I nodded, forcing a smile. "It's been busy, but it's been good." "Still no husband?" someone else asked. As if it were some sort of scandal. I just laughed it off, but I could feel my mom's eyes on me. waiting for me to react. The conversation shifted again, back to Mark's latest achievements. Of course, his success was the talk of the table. Did you hear? Mark sold the biggest property in the city last month. The commission was enormous. My mother's voice was glowing with pride. Mark smiled modestly, but the gleam in his eyes was unmistakable. He loved the attention. That's great, Mark, I said, cutting into my meal, trying to keep my composure. But inside, I felt like a stranger. The jealousy, the resentment, it all came rushing back in a tidal wave. You've done well for yourself, Claire, my aunt commented. Still working in the big city, I see. When are you going to settle down? I wasn't sure what to say. The question seemed harmless enough, but it dug into something deeper. It always had. I'm happy with where I am, I replied, though I couldn't quite manage to sound convincing. Mark had started talking again, boasting about his gym routine and how he was getting serious about his health. Meanwhile, I barely managed to choke down my meal. I wasn't in the mood to celebrate him, not today, not after everything. The dinner continued in its predictable rhythm until the dessert was served. That's when my mother stood up, glass in hand, preparing to make her speech. Thank you everyone for coming, she began. It's so nice to see all of you, and Mark, we're so proud of you. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt my resolve building. This wasn't going to be like the last time. I couldn't sit there, silent, pretending everything was okay. It wasn't. The dinner carried on like a parade of empty compliments and veiled criticisms, all wrapped up in the pretense of family unity. Mark, of course, was the golden child in my mother's eyes, always modest, always humble about his achievements. And me? I was the hard-working daughter who seemed to be disappearing in the background, no matter how much I accomplished. The same script, year after year. I could feel the discomfort pressing on me like a weight, heavier with each passing minute. My mom, smiling brightly, asking about my work, always with that underlying tone of, "When will you get a life outside of this?" It was like she didn't believe my career could be fulfilling on its own. And then, out of nowhere, it happened. My mother's words sliced through the air, cutting through the thin veneer of politeness that had kept the evening flowing. "Claire," she said, her voice too sharp, "you don't really have time for your family, do you? You're so busy making money, but do you ever think about us?" I could feel my jaw tighten, my fingers gripping the edge of my glass harder than I intended. My mom's voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even upset. It was something colder, a mixture of disappointment and frustration, as though all my success was just another reminder that I didn't fit into the life she had envisioned for me. I wanted to scream, to tell her that I was doing this for her, for all of us. I wanted to remind her how many times I sent money, how I kept everything afloat even when no one noticed. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I simply stood up. I hadn't meant to make a scene, but my body moved on its own. "Excuse me," I said, my voice surprising even myself. "I need to say something." All eyes turned to me. Even Mark, who had been talking to one of the cousins, looked up, surprised. The room fell quiet, like they were all waiting for the next awkward exchange. I could hear my heart thudding in my ears. For a moment, I thought about backing out. But no, it was time. "I've been coming to these family gatherings for years," I began, my voice steady but cold. "And every time, I do my best to fit in. I share my successes. I try to be a part of things. But the truth is, it's never been enough for any of you, has it?" The words felt like a punch in my gut, but they also felt freeing. There was no going back now. "I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, trying to prove that I'm worthy of being here. But it's always been about Mark, hasn't it? You've never seen me for who I am, just for what I can do. I'm a financial analyst. I make money, and that's it. That's all I'm good for in this house." I could feel the tension rising, thickening the air in the room. My mother's face was blank, her eyes wide. She had no idea what to say. And in that moment, I realized how little she knew me, how little she cared to understand me. Mark, on the other hand, looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat, eyes darting toward my mom for reassurance. "You've always compared me to him, but do you really think you know what's going on? Do you know how much I've given? The money, the effort? It's never been enough." I paused, taking a breath, willing myself not to let the tears rise. This was not the time. I had to stay in control. "This," I said, pulling out the crumpled name tag from my purse. "This is what you think of me. A parasite." I placed the tag on the table, the word standing out like a slap. My mother's face turned pale. Her eyes flickered between the name tag and me, as though she couldn't believe it. The silence in the room was suffocating, everyone waiting for something to break the tension. But there was no more silence in me. The words had already been spoken. "I have been carrying this for years," I continued, voice shaking but strong. "The lie that Mark is the good one. The lie that I'm the one who's always absent, the one who doesn't care. But I do care, and I'm done being the invisible one in this family." Mark opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off before he could. "No, not this time." It felt like everything was happening in slow motion, my pulse roaring in my ears as I laid it all out. "I've sent over $1,000 every month for 5 years, and you've always told me it was Mark. He's the hero. But it's always been me, Mom. It's always been me." A few gasps spread through the room. My mom looked at me, her lips parted in disbelief. She was trying to piece everything together. How could she not have known? "And that's not all," I added, my voice hardening. "I've kept records, bank statements, transfers. You've been living in a lie, Mom, and I'm done with it." The room was dead silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I didn't care. This wasn't about them. It was about me, finally taking control of my own life. "I'm done pretending to be the villain in this family. Done playing by your rules. I'm not the problem, and I never was." The silence in the room was like a heavy blanket, suffocating every single word one had just spoken. My heart was still pounding in my chest, the adrenaline of finally letting go of years of resentment pumping through my veins. But the weight of what I'd just done was starting to sink in. I had just exposed everything, every lie, every wound that had been festering beneath the surface. It was all out there now, raw and unspoken, and the room had no idea how to react. My mother was the first to break the silence. She looked from the name tag to me, her expression faltering between disbelief and something darker, shame maybe. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, just a shallow gasp. Mark, who had been watching the scene unfold, stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor in a sharp, jarring sound. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and confusion. "Why are you airing our dirty laundry like this? What's wrong with you?" His words cut through me like a knife, not because they were unexpected, but because they were so predictable. He wasn't angry that I had been manipulated. No, he was angry that I had dared to speak the truth, to expose him. His eyes flicked nervously to my mother, as if expecting her to step in and defend him. But she didn't. "Don't you get it, Mark?" I said, my voice low and controlled. "I'm done being the scapegoat. I'm done being the one who's always invisible to you, to Mom. I've been carrying this weight for years. I've been paying your way, supporting this family, and you've been taking credit for it all. It's over." "You're crazy, Claire," he spat. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Mom would never—" "I do know what I'm talking about," I interrupted. "You've been playing this game for years, and I've been the one holding everything together. The money I sent, every month, it's all been me, not you." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I kept my tone steady, like I was discussing the weather. "And now I'm done." Mark's face was turning red. His hands balled into fists at his sides, and I could see the anger building in him, but I didn't flinch. I was beyond the point of caring about his temper. My mom was still standing there, the tears finally starting to gather in her eyes. But there was something else there too, a flicker of realization. It was like she was finally seeing me for the first time. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or just the shock of the truth finally settling in, but something shifted in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she whispered. Her voice was fragile, small in a way that I'd never heard before. I felt the anger well up again, but this time, it wasn't for Mark, it was for her, for all the years of pretending everything was okay, for the way she'd never taken the time to look beneath the surface. "You never wanted to know, Mom," I said, the words almost slipping out before I could stop them. "You never wanted to hear anything I had to say, because you were too busy making Mark the hero of this family. You were too focused on keeping him in the spotlight." The tears that had been gathering in her eyes spilled over, but they weren't the tears of the angry, bitter woman I'd known. These were the tears of someone who finally realized they'd been blind to the truth all along. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to shake herself out of the fog, but the damage had been done. Mark stepped forward, his voice rising. "You think this is going to change anything? Mom and I have been through enough. You think this is going to fix anything? What the hell is wrong with you?" I shook my head. "You still don't get it, do you, Mark? You've been living in a bubble thinking you can just take whatever you want. You've always been the golden child. But I'm done. No more. I've got a life of my own now, and I'm not going to let you use me anymore." At this, Mark seemed to deflate slightly, but his eyes remained cold. He didn't want to admit that I was right, that the game had always been rigged, that he had always been the one benefiting while I took the fall. I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced with anger. "You'll regret this, Claire," he said through gritted teeth. "You really think you're the only one who's had it tough?" I held my ground. "I've done everything I can for this family, and you've thrown it all back in my face. That's what I regret, Mark. You're not the victim here." The room was quiet, except for the sound of my mother's soft sobs in the corner. I could barely look at her. I had tried for so long to earn her love and approval, but all I had ever received in return was guilt and manipulation. The moment I started to see the truth, I realized I had nothing left to give. I turned to leave, my heart pounding in my chest, but before I could step away from the table, I heard my mother speak again. "Claire, please," she started, her voice trembling. "Don't walk away from us." I stopped, but I didn't turn around. The last thing I wanted to do was keep pretending. But I knew that was what she wanted. She wanted everything to go back to how it was. She wanted me to be the perfect daughter and Mark to be the perfect son, and for us to keep playing our roles in the family drama. But I couldn't do it anymore, not after everything. "I'm not walking away," I said, my voice even. "I'm just not going to play along anymore." I left my mother's house that night, without a word. The door closed behind me, but the tension inside lingered in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. I didn't look back, not even once. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, but it wasn't fear I felt. It was something else. Something like relief, but also sadness, as if I had just crossed a line that could never be undone. The drive back to Manhattan was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you reflect on everything, on how many years I'd spent trying to please people who never saw me for who I was. The family I had been desperate to belong to had always existed more in my head than in reality. I had tried to be the daughter my mother wanted, the sister Mark never cared about. But what did it get me? Years of resentment, anger, and finally clarity. I pulled into my parking spot in the garage, and as I turned off the car, I sat there for a moment, staring at the empty space around me. It felt like a physical weight had been lifted. Not because the confrontation had gone well, it hadn't, but because I had finally done what I should have done years ago. I had stopped giving in. As I walked into my condo, the familiar silence of my own space enveloped me. This place, this sanctuary of mine, felt different now. I wasn't just living here. I was owning it, in every sense of the word. I had fought for it. I had worked for it. It was mine, just as I was mine. No more pretending, no more appeasing. I dropped my keys on the counter and walked to the kitchen to pour myself a drink. A glass of red wine, nothing fancy. I didn't need it to drown my emotions, but I could feel my heart still pounding a little from the evening's chaos. After the confrontation, everything was loud in my head, my mother's tears, Mark's anger, my own voice echoing through the house. I took a sip and closed my eyes, letting the warmth spread through me, trying to quiet the noise. But the calm was short-lived. My phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with a text from an unknown number. It was a message from my mother. "Please, Claire, let's talk. I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong. I've always loved you. Please don't walk away from me." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. The words were familiar, too familiar. The apologies, the guilt, this was exactly what I had feared. The manipulation. I set the phone down, walked over to the living room, and sank into the couch. The glass of wine in my hand was still full, but I didn't drink. Instead, I just stared at the empty space in front of me. My mind was torn in two directions. On one side, there was the woman who had given everything, the mother who had neglected to see her daughter's pain for years. On the other side, there was the girl who just wanted her mother's love, the girl who wanted things to go back to the way they once were. But the truth was, things couldn't go back. They had already shifted in a way I couldn't undo. My phone buzzed again, and I reached for it without thinking. This time, it was Mark. The message was short, but it hit harder than I expected. "You've really gone too far this time. I hope you're happy with what you've done to this family. Mom doesn't need this kind of stress." The words stung, not because they were unexpected, but because they were still the same Mark's cowardly way of making everything about him, about his comfort and his image. He didn't care about the truth. He only cared about his own narrative, and now that it was broken, he wanted to pretend it hadn't happened. I let out a laugh that sounded more bitter than I intended. "Stress," I muttered under my breath. "It's only stress for you, Mark, because you have no idea what real struggle looks like." I didn't bother replying. I wasn't playing his games anymore. I wasn't going to fall into the trap of trying to make him understand, because he never would. The following days were a blur of legal meetings and quiet phone calls. There was a part of me that expected to feel some sort of relief, some kind of freedom after everything I had exposed. But instead, the weight of the truth kept pulling me down, dragging me through an emotional swamp I hadn't anticipated. My attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Karen, had been advising me for months on how to protect myself from the inevitable fallout. She'd heard rumors of financial mismanagement within the family, whispers of tax fraud, and a few other less than legal activities involving Douglas. But it wasn't until I found the audit documents that things took a more sinister turn. I had known for years that my mother and Douglas were struggling financially, but I hadn't realized just how deep it went. They had been using the money I sent to cover personal expenses, disguising them as business expenses to avoid taxes. And it wasn't just that. There were forged signatures, inflated invoices, all kinds of sketchy activities to cover up their financial mess. Karen's advice was simple: turn it over to the authorities. Let them handle it. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted justice, not just for me, but for everyone who had been hurt by their actions. I started gathering the evidence, pulling together a case that would put an end to their manipulation for good. By the time I was ready to report everything, I was done. No more guilt. No more second guessing. They had done enough damage, and it was time to let the truth speak for itself. I called the IRS, sent over the documentation, and filed a report. The process was slow, but I knew it was only a matter of time before it all unraveled. I didn't expect immediate consequences, but I knew they were coming. And when they did, I wouldn't be there to pick up the pieces. It wasn't about revenge, though. It was about making sure they faced the reality of their actions. That was the only justice I could give myself. A week later, I received a call. It was from an anonymous source, someone who worked in the real estate business and had seen what Mark was doing behind the scenes. He told me that Mark was involved in an investment scheme that defrauded elderly clients. At first, I thought it was just another rumor, but as he spoke, the details matched the patterns I had seen myself. It was the same thing: false documents, shady dealings, and the manipulation of vulnerable people to turn a profit. I felt my stomach twist, the realization that everything I'd feared was true. Mark wasn't just a liar, he was a criminal. I didn't respond to the tip immediately. I needed time to process it all. But when I called Karen again, the advice was clear. We had everything we needed to make a case. And once that case went public, there would be no going back. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I did know one thing. I had taken control of my own narrative. No one else was going to write it for me anymore. The weeks that followed were like something out of a dream, a bad one. I felt like I was walking through a fog of anticipation, waiting for the storm to hit. And when it finally did, it wasn't the way I expected. There were no grand, dramatic confrontations. There was no tearful apology from Mark or a moment of clarity from my mother. Instead, it was a slow burn, a series of small, inevitable steps that led us to where we needed to be. The first sign came when Mark's real estate company started to crumble. Rumors had been swirling about his shady dealings for months, but no one had proof until now. It was like the walls were closing in on him. He tried to hold everything together, but cracks were starting to show. His colleagues started distancing themselves, and his clients began to pull out, realizing they had been misled. One morning, I woke up to find an article in the local news about a major real estate scam involving elderly clients. The names weren't listed, but the details were all too familiar. It was Mark. It had to be. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me again, but this time, I wasn't afraid. This wasn't my mess to clean up anymore. It wasn't my job to protect him or his secrets. The next few days were filled with phone calls and meetings with investigators. The case against Mark was growing stronger, piece by piece. The tip I had received about his fraudulent activities had been verified, and the authorities had traced the money back to his real estate firm. The evidence was irrefutable, and the more they uncovered, the worse it got. I had never been more grateful to have hired Karen. She was sharp, meticulous, and her expertise made all the difference. She knew how to navigate this world, how to make sure the truth came out and that justice was served. But even as everything around Mark started to fall apart, it wasn't the legal ramifications that hit me the hardest. It was my mother. I had expected her to reach out again, to beg for my forgiveness, or try to explain everything. But no messages came, no desperate texts, no phone calls. For a while, I thought maybe she was just ashamed. Maybe she was finally understanding what had happened. But as the days dragged on, I realized that wasn't it at all. She had never truly understood. She hadn't taken responsibility. She hadn't changed. One afternoon, a few weeks after I filed the report, I got a call from my mother. My phone buzzed, and I almost didn't pick it up. But something inside me told me that I needed to hear her voice one last time, if only to close the door completely. "Claire," she began, her voice sounding fragile, tired. "I need to talk to you." My chest tightened as I sat down on the edge of my bed. "What about?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "I know I haven't been a good mother to you," she said. Her words were slow, as though she was choosing each one carefully. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to fix. But I need you to understand that I never meant to. I always thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you. But I see now. I see now that I've been blind." I held the phone tighter, biting my lip to keep from reacting. "You've been blind?" I repeated. The words felt hollow. "You've been blind, but I have been the one paying the price all these years." I know, she said quickly, her voice trembling. "And I'm so sorry. I've made so many mistakes. But please, Claire, please don't cut me out of your life." Her plea hung in the air, heavy and desperate. I took a long, steadying breath. It wasn't the first time she had apologized, but this time felt different. Or maybe it was just that I was different. I had changed. I wasn't the same person who had been willing to forgive her time and time again, to let her manipulations slide because I craved her approval. "I'm not cutting you out," I said softly. "I'm just letting go." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, and for a brief moment, I thought she might finally understand. But then she spoke again, her voice breaking. "I've lost everything, haven't I? I didn't know how to answer that. It wasn't for me to say anymore. It's not about losing things, Mom. It's about learning from what's happened. I've learned that I can't keep sacrificing myself for your mistakes. And I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it isn't." Another silence stretched between us. I felt the weight of the years we'd spent locked in this toxic cycle. I wanted to feel relief. I wanted to walk away knowing that I had finally broken free. But all I felt was exhaustion. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, her voice small. "But I hope one day you will understand." "I don't know what the future holds, Mom," I said quietly. "But I know that I'm moving forward without you." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a threat. It was just the truth. The hardest truth I had ever said out loud. Days turned into weeks, and the legal battle began to unfold. Mark was arrested for his involvement in the real estate scams. His firm shut down, and his reputation, whatever little of it had been left, was destroyed. But it wasn't just him who was held accountable. The investigation extended to Douglas and my mother. They were both investigated for tax fraud, and the authorities uncovered years of financial deception. My mother's life, once filled with comfort and the illusion of stability, came crashing down. I stayed out of it. I let the law do its work, and I didn't look back. I had no desire to become tangled in their downfall. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about them facing the consequences of their own actions. The next few months were a blur of legal documents, financial audits, and the slow process of rebuilding. But as time went on, I felt myself shedding the last of the old weight. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that family gathering 3 years ago, desperate for love and approval. I was stronger now. I was whole. A year later, I found myself in a place I had never imagined. My career had skyrocketed, and I was promoted to vice president at my firm. My nonprofit organization, which I had founded with the small amount of savings I'd set aside, was thriving. It was helping people who were in situations like I had been trapped, controlled, and abused by people they should have been able to trust. As I sat in my office, looking out over the skyline of Manhattan, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come and how much I had lost along the way. But none of it mattered anymore, because I had gained something far more valuable myself. I had learned that family wasn't about blood. It wasn't about the people who expected you to give everything without ever asking if you were okay. It wasn't about being a good daughter, a good sister. It was about being good to yourself. And that was the lesson I had finally learned. Story 2. During the process of finishing my Christmas card, I looked out the window at the dismal winter sky. It was supposed to be different this year. My family was finally expected to see me for who I truly am this year. That was what I had hoped to believe, anyhow. My gaze strayed to the family portrait that was displayed on my study wall. My brother William, his wife Madison, their kids, and my parents, Frank and Dorothy. There was no sign of me in that picture. I was in the shadows, behind the camera as usual. I am now 45 years old and have established a lucrative career as a graphic designer. My design work is nationally recognized, and my studio, Harrison Imagination, in the center of downtown New York, has earned a great deal of respect. Even if my work life gives me confidence, I still feel more confident around my family. In the dynamics of my family, I frequently revert to feeling like a 15-year-old girl who is insecure. The golden kid has always been William. He was the standout football talent throughout high school. In college, he rose to the position of fraternity president and is currently a prosperous insurance broker. He has always been referred to as the golden boy by my parents, talking about his accomplishments with pride. On the other hand, my creative senses and abilities were only recognized as a pastime. Design is really a temporary solution until you land a full-time position. My mom used to suggest that you should strive for a steady job like the one William had. I had spent months organizing the Christmas party, a scrapbook of memories, handcrafted decorations, and a meal that features our parents' favorite foods. I tried to create the ideal setting by paying close attention to every little detail. It was my opportunity to show my parents how much I loved them and what I was capable of. I was preparing cookies in the kitchen of my flat on the afternoon of Christmas Eve. As I rolled the dough and hummed, the air was filled with the delightful aroma of vanilla and cinnamon. When I saw my mother on the screen when my phone called, I grinned. "I'm only making cookies for the party tomorrow, Mom," I said with a smile. My mother, on the other end, reluctantly cleared her throat. "I have some bad news, Jocelyn," she said. "The celebration for tomorrow must be canceled." My hand stopped. "What? Why?" "Your dad is sick with a cold. According to my mother, he has a bad cough. We don't want to tell everyone about it. Thus, we've made the decision to put it off a little." My chest began to constrict. Months of preparation were in vain. I responded, "That's unfortunate, but it's okay. I'll visit to see how Dad is doing. Whatever he needs, I'll bring it." My mother hurriedly exclaimed, "No, you don't have to do that. Your father needs to sleep. After Christmas, let's get together." I hung up and then removed the cookies from the oven and set them on a cooling rack. There was a problem. It was uncommon for my father to become ill in my parents' place. My apartment was only a 15-minute drive away. I felt restless that evening. Several times, I picked up my phone to consider calling my father. I finally made the decision to see him on Christmas morning to see how he was doing. Early on Christmas morning, I got up. I made a basket filled with freshly baked cookies and medicinal soup. I started to worry about my father's health as I was driving over. Maybe he should see a doctor if he was truly sick. I was taken aback as I pulled onto my parents' street. The home has many automobiles parked in front of it, a large SUV in red. The first thing I saw was William's car. Madison's many CDs were beside it. Other unknown vehicles were parked as well. I retrieved the basket after parking my car on the curb. I could hear laughter and music coming from inside the house as I got closer. I paused and paid attention. It was definitely the sound of a party. I reached for the doorknob, but I was unable to turn it. Instead, I stealthily approached the window in the living room and peered through a curtain gap. My heart stopped when I saw what was inside. The whole family, including my parents, William and Madison, and their children, were gathered around the Christmas tree in the living room having a good time. Other family members and friends' faces were also visible. The room was adorned with the ornaments I had made, and the table was laden with a sumptuous meal. However, seeing my father startled me the most. He was sitting on the sofa, laughing with a glass in his hand. There was no sign of a cold. He looked completely healthy. A pain shot through my chest. They had lied to me. They intentionally excluded me. My hands began to tremble. I placed the basket on the ground and pulled out my cellular phone. I needed evidence, so I took several photos through the window, capturing images of my smiling family. Afterward, I quietly returned to my car. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel on the drive back to my apartment. I desperately tried to hold back my tears as I opened the door and entered. I finally broke down. Sitting on the floor, I cried for hours. On Christmas night, I finally gathered myself and opened Instagram. Madison's latest post caught my eye, accompanied by the hashtags #HarrisonFamilyChristmas and #FamilyTraditions. It was a photo of the entire family gathered around the dining table, toasting with smiles. The best Christmas ever. Celebrating our parents' 50th anniversary together was the best. Read the caption. I zoomed in on the photo. The party I had planned for months, the centerpiece I had chosen, the menu cards I had designed, the Christmas banner I had made. All of it was my idea, yet I was nowhere to be seen. Anger and sadness swirled within me. I took a screenshot of the photo. The next day, I resolved to confront my parents and headed to their house. When I knocked, my mother answered the door. Jocelyn's surprise was evident on her face. I thought you weren't coming today. Well, I wasn't invited yesterday, I said coldly. As I entered the living room, there were William and Madison, along with their children. From Madison's post, I knew they had stayed over after yesterday's Christmas party. Jocelyn. My father stood up and tried to approach me. How are you feeling? I asked sarcastically. Is the cold better? My father looked confused. What are you talking about? This. I placed the photos I had taken on the table so they were visible. Yesterday's Christmas party. Mom told me that Dad was sick with the cold. You all have excluded me intentionally from the party I had planned for months. The room fell silent. William cleared his throat and told the children to go play outside. Jocelyn. It's complicated, he said. Complicated? I laughed. What's so complicated? You just didn't want to invite me, did you? That's not it, my mother quickly said. Just that you're alone, and everyone else came with their families. Am I not family? My voice trembled. Or his family? Just William and his family. I'm always a secondary character, always an afterthought. My heart is just a hobby, and only William's job matters. My success is ignored, while only William's success is celebrated. Jocelyn, calm down. My father said you always get too emotional. Emotional? The first trembled with anger. For 45 years I've tried to be acknowledged by you. I'm successful as a graphic designer. My designs are recognized nationwide. But you've never really seen me. You've never once been proud of me. That's not true, my mother exclaimed. Of course we're proud of you. Then why did you exclude me from the party? Why did you lie? William stood up and approached me. Jocelyn, stop making everything about yourself. Like Mom said, everyone came with their families and you're alone. So I wasn't invited because I'm alone. Is that the real reason? Because I'm not married. Because I don't have a family. I don't exist. Jocelyn. My father said, looking fatigued. Let's just start this. You're usually like this. You take things too personally. Personal? Yes, this is personal, I yelled. I am your daughter. I'm meant to be part of this family too. Of course you are, my mother said soothingly. You are our daughter, but you have always pursued your own path. You selected a different life than ours. I pursued a career. Is that incorrect? William is working for a career as well. The golden boy is him. Who am I? Only a shadow. Let's get this talk over with, Jocelyn. My dad got up. This is only a miscommunication. You are loved by us. But if this emotional outburst is going to happen, I'm quite justified in feeling this way. I said, I've been trying to get your recognition for years. However, it is now over. Enough is enough. I'm done trying to win your affection or your favor. Don't you think we're still family? With concern, my mother inquired. Family? I gazed at her. Family members are meant to love, support, and respect one another. That's not how you ever treated me. I made my way to the door. Hold on, Jocelyn, William yelled. You'll regret leaving in this manner. I turned around and gave him a glance. No, William. My only regret is that I didn't leave earlier. I went outdoors after opening the door. Silently, without turning around, snow was starting to form. I went to my car on foot. This was a fresh start rather than the finish. I had been trying to win my family's affection and acceptance for 45 years. But now was the moment to value and cherish myself. And that was the solution to it all, in the end. Organizing paperwork in my flat felt like a sudden release of decades worth of collected grief. Amidst an assortment of ancient documents, I recalled something startling. I discovered the house with my name on it and the mortgage papers removed. My parents' home was listed as the address on the mortgage. Bewildered, I reviewed the tax documents over the phone with the bank. As soon as I finished from college, my parents told me that they would take up a home mortgage in my name and make the monthly payments in order to help me raise my credit score. I didn't completely comprehend the details when I signed. It is true that my parents paid the property taxes and the monthly mortgage on their home, but officially, the house was all mine, and everything was done in my name. My parents never informed me that the house was in my name, but they had taken advantage of my high credit score to get reasonable loan rates. Thus, the house is legally mine, I whispered. My name was also used to open a number of bank accounts and credit cards. According to additional research, someone had stolen my identity. After closely reviewing the materials, Attorney Edward Collins stated, "This is a serious issue. Without your permission, your parents have been carrying out financial transactions in your name. Financial fraud and identity theft may result from this." "What ought I to do?" I inquired. "My hands are shaking. We must first collect all the evidence," Edward stated. "After then, you must choose whether to file a lawsuit. You can choose from a number of choices. You might start a civil case or press criminal accusations, or you might just say that you own the house." I felt that my parents' actions should have some repercussions, but for a long time I didn't want to punish them. "The house is for sale. I want to close all the accounts they opened in my name," I finally said. "During the upcoming weeks, to sell the house, my lawyer and I collaborated with a real estate company. We also carried out a thorough financial investigation that turned up every transaction my parents had made in my name. My parents were incensed when they received the notice of the house sale. As anticipated, I had a ton of angry messages on my phone. After ignoring the majority of them, I finally took my mother's direct call. "What do you want to accomplish?" Weeping, she asked. "Are you planning to sell our home?" "Mom, it's my house. The home you purchased under my name. However, you consented to it years ago when you received your college degree. However, that was only the start of you creating accounts in my name without my permission." I raised my voice. "You used my identity without my permission. That is deception. Jocelyn, please." The phone rang with my father's voice. It lacked its usual authority, now mixed with fear and pleading. "Please don't kick us out of the house. We have nowhere else to go." He stumbled over his words, his voice trembling. "It was wrong to use your name, but we did it thinking it was for the family, for your future." "My future? You never once thought about my future." "I am an old man, Jocelyn." My father's voice dropped to a whisper. "Please don't end my life like this." "Give me another chance. It's too late, Dad," I said. "The lawyer has already prepared all the documents. The house will be sold, and all the accounts you opened in my name will be closed." "Why are you doing this? Why are you punishing us?" "Why?" I scoffed. "Why did you exclude me from the Christmas party? Why did you steal my plans and lie to me? Why have you always put me last?" "That's different," my mother exclaimed. "You're just too sensitive. We just forgot to invite you." "Forgot? I trembled with anger. Don't lie. Mom, you told me this story about the cold to intentionally exclude me. And now you're lying again after being caught using my identity. Are you gonna sue us? My father asked, his voice filled with fear. No, I'm just reclaiming what's mine. My name and my identity. I'm giving you 1 month to leave the house. After hanging up, I took a deep breath. I was shaking, but not from fear. It was a sense of liberation. For the first time, I stood up for myself. The next day, William showed up at my apartment. He was furious. How could you do this? He shouted, banging on the door. Mom and Dad need that house. Where are they supposed to live now? I did not open the door. Instead, I spoke through the intercom. William, go home. Let your family live with you. I can't afford that, he yelled. That's not my problem. You've ignored me for years, and now you need my help. How ironic. William didn't leave. He continued, shouting outside my door for hours. Eventually, I had to call the police. William was warned and left, but he kept coming back. I was forced to get a restraining order. As the house sale proceedings progressed, the full extent of my parents' financial fraud was revealed. They had created many credit cards in my name, building up tens of thousands of dollars in debt. They had also started investment accounts in my name. Following my lawyer's instructions, I formally reported them to the police. Weeks later, a little piece appeared in the local newspaper. Local couple arrested for identity theft and financial fraud. My parents were handed a 5-year suspended sentence and face huge penalties. They lost the property and most of their retirement money. After reading the piece, I looked out the window for a long time. There was no sensation of victory, just a peculiar emptiness. I never intended to hurt my parents. All I wanted was to be noticed, loved, and regarded as one of the family. But that was not given to me. My phone rang and a message from my project manager flashed up. The customer in Milan enjoyed the presentation for the new corporate concept. The deal is what they desire. Jocelyn, congratulations. I grinned. At least my abilities and value were acknowledged in my work. William's employment and social status were also harmed by the public revelation of my parents' financial crime under my identity. Client trust is the cornerstone of the insurance broker profession. As a result, the community was greatly agitated by even a modest local newspaper piece captioned "Local Couple Arrested for Identity Theft and Financial Fraud." As word got out among customers and business associates, William, who was branded as the son of scammers, found himself losing contracts one after another, and it was harder to get new customers. Now, the erstwhile golden kid was having serious financial problems. A few months later, I was organizing a vacation to Italy by myself. After a week-long trip in Rome and Florence, I had appointments with new clients in Milan. I had dreamed about this for a long time. Catherine, an old family friend, paid me an unexpected visit the day before I left. Catherine responded, I thought you should know about your parents. They currently reside in a modest suburban apartment. Your mother works as a grocery cashier, and your father has secured a job as a night security guard. William made an effort to assist them, but he is also having financial difficulties. They truly regret what transpired, and I listened stoically. They're hoping to see you. I'd rather not see them, I said strongly. They took my identity, disregarded me for years, and now they feel bad about it. It isn't genuine remorse. It's only remorse for the results of what they did. They are your family, though, Catherine begged. No more. Family is not limited to biological ties. Family is about loving, respecting, and helping one another. I was never treated that way by them. Catherine gave a sorrowful nod. Before she left, she remarked, I hope you change your mind. My stay in Italy was enlightening. My design studio gained worldwide clients as a result of the successful business meetings in Milan. I studied the historic Forum Romanum ruins and went to the Colosseum when I was in Rome. I felt liberated from the demands and judgments of my family. I was leading my life as I saw fit. As I got back to my lodging, I checked my business emails. On my laptop, a communication from an unknown sender named PhD Harrison was among them, but I soon recognized it as coming from my parents. We had to write this even though we don't think you'll read it, Jocelyn. We are now your parents. We're in pain. Our lives have been ruined by your deeds. Our possessions and dignity were taken away by you. We cherished you for years. We stood by you, help you pursue your goal of becoming a designer and cover the cost of your education. You also deceived us. One day we hope you will understand the seriousness of what you have done and feel regret. It might be too late by then. Harrison, Frank, and Dorothy. I sneered. Even now, my parents believed they were the victims. I did not respond, therefore I erased the email. I reflected on my relationship with my family that evening while I sipped wine on the hotel terrace. It brought back pleasant childhood memories. My father used to push me on the swing. William taught me to ride a bike, and my mother put my first artwork on the refrigerator. However, additional unpleasant memories eclipsed these pleasant ones. I won an art prize, but my parents didn't care. My mother asked when I would have a real job when I got my first big design project, and there were no family members present for my college graduation. And more recently, financial malfeasance was discovered and the exclusion from the Christmas celebration. They don't deserve my affection or allegiance, I told myself. A few days later, William Jocelyn sent another email. How miserable are mom and dad now, do you know? Because of a self-centered lady who is upset over not getting invited to a party, their lives are destroyed. You ruined the family. William, you will never be forgiven. I also erased this email. They were still perplexed. It was more than simply the celebration. It was about how they had treated me over the years and about my entire existence. I made the decision to start over by moving to a new apartment after my trip to Italy. I had a lot of family memories from my former residence. The new location was larger and nearer to my design studio. I also updated my email address and phone number. In the new apartment, I wanted to break all connections to the past. I started making new friends. Antonio, the art director at my studio, and I became especially close, and eventually our friendship blossomed into a romantic partnership. Antonio didn't inquire about my background. He loved my future and my present. My career kept taking off. More foreign clients came to my studio as a result of its success in Milan. I began mentoring aspiring designers after being acknowledged as one of the most significant female figures in the design field. The course of my life had diverged greatly from my childhood dreams. It was mine, made on my terms, my own creation, and in the end, it was all worthwhile, even though it was painful and lonely at times. I occasionally get messages from old friends of my parents. These messages contain information about William's new job and my parents. They have relocated to a distant, smaller town and are leading a simple life. William now works in a factory after losing faith in the insurance sector. I feel a range of complicated emotions in response to these updates. Remorse, sympathy, or even a feeling of accomplishment that justice has been done. Most likely everything listed above. I have no regrets though. They stole my identity in addition to neglecting and excluding me. It was a court case. My mother occasionally sends me letters. They are replete with expressions of regret and requests for peacemaking. You are loved by us. You are missed. Give us another chance, please. However, the same message is always concealed behind those words. Return to us. Please pardon us, and return things to how they were. The stack of envelopes catches my attention. Sometimes I open one, but most remain unopened. Months' worth have accumulated. I take them one by one and feed them to the shredder. The past should remain in the past. This is my story. It belongs to no one else. Tomorrow is a new day. A day full of new possibilities. And I am looking forward to it. Story 3, I always thought I was second best even as a little child. Like a shadow constantly following someone more luminous and adored. Anne is my name. In our family, I am the youngest of 2 girls. And I have stood in the light of my elder sister, Stacy, for as long as I can remember. Every time, I felt like I was in the background. It was difficult to ignore the glaring disparity in our parents' treatment of my sister and me. At my parents' club, Stacy was escorted to special events and singing contests. I was left at home, working alone and quietly on my schoolwork. She automatically stood out and attracted attention everywhere she went because she was 3 years older than me. She seemed meant to be the center of attention, treated as though it were her due. As a result, I always thought my parents were just interested in her. My parents never passed up the opportunity to develop her gift if a teacher pointed it out. To bring out the best in her, they exerted every effort. I had the impression that I was concealed in the shadows. Due to our family's financial situation, It was challenging to pay for Stacy's courses and supplies, but my mother gladly boasted to everyone about her singing ability since it was so mesmerizing, thinking that she will succeed greatly in the future. On the other side, I felt demoralized by having high expectations anytime I attempted to showcase my own abilities. "Let's wait till next semester," my mother said tentatively with a little pitying grin when I informed her about my passion in painting. "We're already spending a lot of money on Stacy's singing training." When Stacy started her final year of high school, the gap widened even farther. When I was 15, my parents shared a significant choice they had made with me over dinner one evening. "We've been carefully saving up," they said. "We have decided to send Stacy to Preston College," my father said with pride. It was among the state's most esteemed educational institutions. Stacy's face was a picture of excitement. With much enthusiasm, my mother remarked, "That's just fantastic. You can also utilize our flat close to the school for other purposes. You may concentrate fully on your academics as you won't have to worry about rent." I pushed the peas on my plate in silence when I heard this. Since no one was interested in me anyhow, there was no need to disguise my feelings. In our home, everyone's eyes were focused on Stacy's happy, radiant face. Her smile was so bright that it seemed like I was losing my life. I heard Stacy talking passionately about her fantasies as I laid in bed that night. She talked passionately about her goals and ambitions for the future. Seeing how much money my parents had spent on Stacy's tuition and living expenses, as well as giving her a free apartment, made me start to rationally consider how I could pay for my own school. I gradually came to understand that I couldn't anticipate the same level of assistance in this circumstance. It struck me hard when I realized that fact, but rather than sobbing, I began to make plans for what to do next. I made the decision to go to my grandparents' antique store the following day. My granddad paid close attention when I told him about my predicament. He said, "And I might be able to help a little with your college expenses if you're serious about this." He paused for a bit and placed his hand thoughtfully on his chin. "However, I believe that you would benefit from some experience making your own money. After school, how about working here?" As Stacy was packing for her esteemed institution, things started to move forward. I began working every afternoon after school at the antique store. Under my grandfather's supervision, I helped with inventory management, catalog preparation, and even customer service at the business. I acquired new abilities and progressively grasped the fundamentals of managing a business. My grandma, on the other hand, graciously supported my hectic days by frequently giving me refreshments and telling me about the background of the old goods in the store. I gradually started to realize the significance of the work I was doing after learning from those stories how important an item's historical worth is. My parents didn't appear astonished when I informed them that I had chosen to save money for college on my own. Rather, they appeared relieved, as if my resolve to forge my own route reassured them. I found the 3 years I worked at my grandparents' antique store to be quite important and significant. At the shop, I painstakingly searched through vintage jewelry and dusted old furniture every afternoon. I gradually gained a strong sense of efficiency and appreciation for us, and by the time I graduated from high school, I had saved enough money from my earnings to pay for college. Additionally, it was because my grandparents paid me more per hour than other people. They appeared to be being kind in that way. My family and I had a simple meal to celebrate my graduation, instead of a big party. However, it seemed sufficient. I was really proud of myself for working so hard to get this far without needing any extra help for college. In order to maximize my savings, I selected a practical business program at a nearby state university. Making this decision gave me the confidence to start down a strong path toward my future profession. I was even able to save some money at the state university, and the tuition was reasonable. I rode the bus to university and stayed at home. A simple decision, but one that makes sense to ease financial pressure. I summoned my confidence one evening and said, "Dad, Mom, I'm considering purchasing a used vehicle." Without taking his eyes off his smartphone, it would be a bit simpler to go to class. My dad gave me a blunt response. "Apologies. At the moment, we lack the resources." In an attempt to make things more agreeable, my mother added hastily, "Isn't the bus enough? Plenty of pupils utilize it." Reflecting on all the assistance they had given me thus far, I found myself unable to answer. Instead, I silently carried a tremendous sense of thankfulness in my heart. There were innumerable instances when I realized how lucky I was to have their support. Each time, an inexpressible sensation of thanks would build up inside me. Stacy had acquired her driver's license a long time ago, and I still vividly recall the afternoon she received her automobile. Back then, I had just finished my first year of college and was happy to have made it through my spring examinations. But at that time, our house was filled with a peculiar enthusiasm and energy. The reason was that Stacy was ready to go on the next phase of her life after finally graduating from Preston College. My parents threw a lavish celebration for Stacy's graduation, inviting friends, family, and neighbors. Every aspect of the big day's preparations was meticulously prepared in the hectic days before the ceremony. The home was bustling with activity as guests gathered to celebrate Stacy's accomplishment. There were lots of happy grins, animated discussions, and a general sense of joy. Just as I was finishing up the snacks on the dishes in the kitchen, Stacy stepped in. Joe, her lover, was beside her. She had dated while she was a college student. Leaning into one another as though they were completely carefree, the two of them walked inside the room. The genuine smiles that flashed across Stacy's and Joe's features made the moment seem like it was taken from a movie. Their brilliance enthralled everyone in their vicinity, and they quickly became the center of attention. As they walked in, Stacy spoke to the assembled crowd in a positive tone. "Joe and I are engaged." Cheers and congrats broke out throughout the room. An atmosphere of warmth and brightness suddenly filled the room, and Mom, overcome with emotion, stared at Stacy with tears in her eyes. In contrast, Dad showed his happiness by giving Stacy a firm pat on the shoulder. I briefly feared that Stacy could lose her equilibrium due to the ferocity of the touch. Nevertheless, there was a great sense of togetherness in the air as family and friends rejoiced together. But even at this happy moment, something unexpected was still about to happen. When Joe started talking, it was unexpected. He began speaking in a soft, kind voice, and his remarks astounded everyone and made an effect. "We intend to move to Connecticut after the wedding. There, my parents have a thriving business and have extended an invitation to us to join them. We're going to take control." As soon as she heard this, Mom's tears began to fall in big quantities. "What a wonderful journey my daughter and her husband are taking," she whispered. With a loud, pleased voice, Dad said, "I always knew you'd achieve something great." I observed the action from the corner of the room in silence. Despite balancing school and a part-time work at a nearby cafe, I finished my first year with a flawless 4.0 GPA, but no one seemed to notice. However, I had been used to that. I spent a lot of my second year of college assisting with my sister's wedding preparations. Nevertheless, I worked hard at my academics and made progress. My parents put a lot of effort into making sure their child had the wedding of their dreams. They obtained large loans for the venue, music, flowers, food, and other expenses. For Stacy and Joe, no cost was spared. The actual wedding was a lavish and heartfelt event, and Stacy was the highlight of the day. I proudly donned my bridesmaid dress, which I had paid for myself, and watched my parents dance joyfully, feeling pleased for them. They had gone all out to have a fantastic wedding. When Jill and Stacy relocated to Connecticut, I was aware that my parents would have to pay back the debts for many years. I was watching TV that night. "I need you to start paying for living expenses," Mom remarked to me. The unexpected request surprised me a bit. What caused this? In my mind, I nearly blurted out the idea. "Stacy got a free flat from you?" Dad sat nervously in the recliner he didn't often use. They had some breathing room now, but the wedding loans were still unpaid. What I was hearing was unbelievable. My voice trembled a little as I spoke. "You've never been asked for anything by me. I've ridden the bus everywhere and worked part-time to pay for my education." To stop me, Mom held out her hand. A subtle glance then passed between her and her father, the type they frequently exchanged while determining how much to spend on Stacy's various hobbies. I eventually gave a satisfactory response. I would have to pay $1,300 a month, according to Mom. Though I knew it would be useless, I still wanted to debate further. "I'll pay $1,300 a month, all right?" In order to afford it, I started spending $1,300 a month for living costs after that month. I took on more work at the cafe. I frequently worked till closing or in between classes. I hardly had time to sleep because I had to juggle job and school. My last year of college flew by as I was lugging my cafe apron and textbooks. I stayed up late studying every night. Graduation day soon came as my classmates got ready for lavish festivities and parties. My grandparents were the only people my parents invited to a private meal at home. We ate homemade lasagna at the dining table instead of Stacy's expensive caterer. Grandma softly took my hand and stretched across the table. She said, "Dearest Dan, you have my utmost admiration. It's really amazing to graduate with high honors while working part-time." Mom's phone chimed and her face brightened as she read the message before I could reply. "Talking about success," Mom said. "Stacy texted me just now. Their firm is going really well," she remarked. "They intend to open 2 more sites." My graduation meal turned into a celebration of Stacy's accomplishments in Connecticut, and I witnessed it happen. Grandma and Grandpa looked at each other as though they were sensing something. Grandpa touched my shoulder tenderly. My academic efforts paid off sooner than I had anticipated. One of the best companies in the city, Anderson Mitchell, recruited me less than 2 weeks after I graduated. I was thrilled about the future that awaited me, and the starting income was more than I had anticipated. Life quickly became regular, and I became intensely focused on demonstrating my worth at work. Nevertheless, my mother reminded me of the living expenditures each month. "Remember to make your payment by Friday. That money is what we're banking on." After 3 years, I suddenly got a big promotion and was sent to work overseas for a year. It was the ideal chance for me, not only for work, but also to finally move out of my parents' place. I was so excited that I could barely control myself. Finally, I wouldn't have to worry about how I was going to pay for my living bills. Nevertheless, I still had a persistent worry that consumed me. The issue was about my dog, Max. It was a bittersweet fact of life to leave Max behind. For the sake of my job, I had to make a decision that I had to face. Finding the right person to look after him while I was away was my biggest concern. I wanted to leave Max with someone I trusted because he was a significant member of my family. I asked my parents to look after him after giving it some thought. I hoped that would calm me down, but something else came up. My parents informed me that Max's care would cost $1,300 per month. I wanted to push back at first because I was shocked, but after listening to their justification, I started to see things from their point of view. They clarified that adopting Max and providing long-term care would not be simple because they had their own lives to lead. They argued that the expense was justified by the time and effort required to care for a dog, which included daily walks, meals, and veterinary visits. Even though the costs felt heavy, I understood that Max's well-being and health came first. I decided that in order to make sure Max was taken care of, I had to pay $1,300 a month. After my parents' payments were made, I started getting ready for my new life abroad while closely monitoring Max's health from a distance. I found out that Stacy and Joe had a baby boy while I was on assignment overseas. I never made the effort to go see them in person, even though I saw their photo shared on social media. By that time, the only communication we had left was the occasional Christmas greeting and birthday message. Everything was going well with that arrangement until my mother's voice began to shake during a phone call. "I need to discuss Stacy with you. Their business appears to have collapsed due to an issue." In addition, Joe and his parents had a major argument. They have reportedly not spoken in days and are incensed at the way he handled things. I sensed what was about to happen, so I closed my eyes. According to Stacy, she will return to live at home. She also said something about the baby and Joe. "I see," I said softly. Mom seemed to pause and ask if it would be all right if I cleaned out your room. The decision sounded as if it had already been decided. "Stacy and Joe need to set up a nursery for Daniel." "And where am I supposed to sleep when I return?" "There's a perfect sofa in the living room," Mom replied. It seemed like the move was already finalized. "You're joking, right? Why my room?" Mom's tone turned sharp. "Stop being so selfish. And Stacy has a baby. That baby needs a proper room," with those words. I had no choice but to accept that my room would be overtaken by a crib and other baby items. My belongings were hastily piled into a corner of the living room, with my sister's family moving back into the house. Space became cramped, and that's when my parents brought up another demand. They wanted me to double the payment for Max's care. They argued that having Stacy's family around increased their workload, and the cost of caring for the dog needed to match that. The proposal left me both shocked and slightly perplexed. While I thought I could manage $1,300 a month, doubling that amount was far too much for me to bear. Additionally, with my sister's family moving back, I started to worry if Max could stay comfortable in the changing household environment. I told them I needed time to consider it and then ended the call. That night, I turned on my computer and began searching for apartments. I shortlisted a few promising places within walking distance of my workplace. I told myself I needed to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. After careful consideration, I made a calm decision to leave home and take Max with me. Since my overseas assignment was nearing its end, it felt like the perfect timing. I was certain that bringing Max back to live with me was the best decision for him. When I shared my choice with my parents, their reactions were a mix of surprise and concern, but I stood firm and didn't waver. I genuinely believed that staying with me was what would make Max happiest. Later, the first picked him up and moved into my new apartment. I ordered takeout and sat on the bare living room floor. The day I picked Max up from my parents' house was the last time I saw my family. I simply said goodbye and left. I didn't experience any guilt. I simply felt a sense of peace in the calm of my new apartment. I spent quiet days settling in and adjusting to my new life. I purchased a comfy bed, a soft sofa not designed for sleeping, and my own cooking gear, although I wasn't totally adjusted to the new home. Work was going well, and Max and I spent full days together. About a month later, my mother contacted me without any prelude. She plunged into a furious diatribe. "Why haven't you sent the money? Don't you believe you should respect your promises?" She made a demand. I chuckled and answered, "What Stacy needs right now is to accept full responsibility for herself. I've taken Max, moved out, and I'm paying rent for my own apartment. Therefore, I no longer have a duty to pay living costs. Stacy should be the one managing that." What did you just say? Do you have any clue what type of predicament Stacy is dealing with right now? It doesn't matter to me what type of circumstance Stacy is in. It's time for her to stand up, work, and accept responsibility for her own living costs. I'll be keeping an eye on how things progress. After I talked, there was quiet on the other end of the phone. As though I could hear her structuring her thoughts, I could sense the reality settling into her head. Only a jobless daughter who had never paid a single bill remained after her formerly reliable source of money vanished. Suddenly, I knew the sweetness of my mother's voice, from when she used to beg for favors when I was a kid. "Take your time. Is there no way we can work this out together? Why don't you move back in with us? Wouldn't it be the most equitable arrangement?" I took a seat back in the new couch that I had picked out with care. Nobody was allowed to complain about anything in my flat. I apologize, but it isn't going to happen. But Anne, we are, after all, family. Family? It seemed almost unbelievable to me that she dared to say such. I interrupted her in the middle of her statement without thinking. "Family? Without notifying me, you attempted to give Stacy my money. You converted my room into a nursery and abandoned me to pay for everything on my own. You treated Stacy like royalty and my life like an ATM. What is a family? Farewell." I instantly blocked their phone after hanging up. 6 months have passed since then. Although I never asked for specifics, Grandma and Grandpa have kept me informed about their circumstances. They know I made the proper choice and they know what I need. Daniel, Joe, and Stacy continue to reside in the house but make no financial contributions. My parents are reportedly having financial difficulties as a result of the outstanding loan. They have even approached family members to solicit money. However, word has gotten out about how they preferred Stacy to me. Nobody wants to give them a loan. Naturally, neither have my grandparents provided any assistance. I've even heard that they've made measures to prevent my parents from inheriting their fortune. Joe apparently lacks drive to work, while Stacy, who has a young kid, has yet to find employment. For my part, I lead a tranquil new existence. I recently started taking evening MBA programs, purchased a new car, and received another promotion at work. With a refrigerator full of fresh goods, my flat is always tidy and ready for me to cook whenever I feel like it. I now fall asleep soundly in my own bed every night. I ran across one of Joe's relatives at the grocery store just the other day. They were expecting another baby, she said casually. I replied with a straightforward grin and my best wishes for them happiness. I had a sneaking suspicion that my parents were trying to figure out how to pay for the new baby's daycare. I don't have to worry about it anymore, though. I'm prioritizing myself for the first time, and it feels like the correct decision. Although it was a difficult, emotional road, I am steadfast in my choice and have no regrets. Max at my side. Sincerely, I'm happy and looking forward to the new life that awaits me.